Hello, hello, hello. We are going to let people join. I'm really excited about this very important live that I'm hosting today with the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida. And there they are. I'm actually going to bring them up. Give me 1 second. Boom. Congressman Maxwell Frost, and I am doing this with the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU of Florida. They should be joining any second now.
Can you hear us?
Hey,
Hello,
how are y'all
are you?
doing?
Hanging in there.
Yeah, I know, with all things considered. And good to see you again, Meredith, too.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah, of course. First off, I just want to thank everybody so much for joining this live today. I wanted to put this together to bring up and talk a little bit about a very, very important thing that I've been working on with the ACLU of Florida, that is also indicative of a greater problem as well. There are many reasons why I think every Floridian and really every American should be very, very concerned about what is going down at Baker County Detention Center. And for people who don't know, this is a few hours north of Orlando in my district. I actually went a few months ago with some members of my staff from for a surprise visit. But before we start, I just want to let everyone introduce themselves really quick. Many of you know me or might know me. I'm Congressman Maxwell Frost. I represent Florida's 10th congressional district, and I'll give it over to Amy.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Amy Gottschall. I'm an immigrants' rights attorney. I'm with the ACLU of Florida, and I'm here with Meredith.
Hi, I'm Meredith Albertavi, and my husband was detained at Baker County for over 16 months while he was fighting his immigration case.
Well, thank you both so much for doing this with us. And I want to let everyone know, too, everything we've done on Baker Detention Center has really been in lockstep with the ACLU of Florida, the amazing work that they're doing, but also the advocates and whistleblowers and folks that are pushing to make sure that we do what's right, which is shut down this facility. Amy, can I give it to you to just chat a little bit about Baker's history and kind of how y'all have been working on leading this advocacy on getting Baker shut down?
Definitely. So the ACLU of Florida has been working in conjunction with several other advocacy organizations for the past few years, investigating the conditions at Baker. We have been running a hotline for complaints. People who are detained and their family members can call us and talk to us about the conditions they're experiencing. We've received hundreds of complaints from people at Baker, egregious complaints. I've been on several hotline calls talking to people. You can just hear the desperation in their voices about what they're experiencing. It's beyond inhumane. They're treated like animals, or worse in some situations. Even though immigration detention is supposed to be civil detention, it's not supposed to be punitive. You're not there to serve a criminal sentence. In reality, it's akin to prison, and it is very punitive, especially at Baker. And so there's 3 immigration detention centers in Florida. Baker is one of them, and it's run by the Baker County Sheriff's Office. And they have a long history of abusing the people in their care. We have gotten a lot of complaints of a variety of conditions issues. To name a few, there's no access to clean drinking water. The water coolers that are there in the facilities have rusty staples and cockroaches in them and other food scraps. And those water coolers are often just left empty and not refilled, and people don't have water at all. The food, there's often not given enough food. I've heard a meal consisted of a couple spoonfuls of uncooked beans. There's often bugs in the food and it's rotten. It's just like very unacceptable. The roof leaks, there's mold on the walls, there's burns coming out of the drains. People get spider bites and have to go to medical to get taken care of for spider bites. The clothes that people wear smell horrible. They're blackened. The underwear has black stains in them. There's rips all the way up the pant leg to people's thighs. People get rashes just from how dirty and disgusting the clothes are. Baker does not provide adequate access to hygiene products. They do not give enough toilet paper. People will regularly run out of toilet paper between disbursements of toilet paper and end up using their socks to wipe, one for feces and one for urine, because they have nothing else to use as toilet paper. And women are not given enough pads every month. A couple of years ago, since the facility is kept at a very cold 53 degrees, women were using pads to keep warm because they had no other way to stay warm in the facility. And in response, Baker started limiting the supply of sanitary pads given to women instead of just making the temperature warmer. So that's just an example of how punitive their response to everything is at the facility. There's also a lot of medical neglect. We hear about that a lot. There are people who are not given the prescriptions. So a lot of people come to Baker already having a prescription that another doctor has said your life depends on having this prescription. And Baker just does not give them the right medicine, does not give them medicine at the right time. We've heard of people who rely on certain medicines to not get seizures, and Baker does not comply with the prescription that their life depends on, and then they have seizures at the facility. But that's just one example. There's a million examples of medical neglect, serious medical neglect at the facility. And back in the summer and fall of 2022, the ACLU of Florida and other advocacy organizations and people who are detained at Baker started publicly speaking out and putting pressure on Baker about all of these conditions issues. And in response, Baker obstructed access to legal counsel. They denied us entry to meet with our clients, even though we had pre-approved visits. They changed their legal mail policies to make it harder for attorneys to send mail to their clients and vice versa. They changed their legal phone call facilitation practices so that they don't facilitate access to confidential legal calls anymore. Every time you try and advocate for yourself or make things a little better, they just make it 10 times worse. And one example of this that I want to talk about for a bit is that one of my clients came out last week with a civil rights and civil liberties complaint. Her name is Anna. You can look it up, the complaint, for more information online. But this is just another example that demonstrates how punitive all of the conditions are. So an officer came to her pod to get the group to take them out to rec, and she asked the officer if she could go to the bathroom because she needed to change her pad before they went to rec. And she speaks English. She doesn't speak Spanish, or she speaks Spanish, not English. And the officer started yelling at her in English, but that didn't help her understand English. And the officer took her to solitary because she wasn't following the English commands that she didn't understand. And so she ended up being in solitary for over a month and having multiple mental health emergencies while she was there, because she had come into Baker after being trafficked, and she had come in with depression and anxiety and PTSD, and solitary was not appropriate for her. It was not warranted given what happened. And it was dangerous to her health. Her mental and physical health declined significantly while she was in solitary. And then at one point while she was there, Baker didn't let her attend her child custody proceedings, and she was terrified that she was going to lose custody of her son. And so she was having a mental health emergency, and she was banging her head against the wall. Baker was not addressing her mental health needs. And in response, instead of providing mental health care, a bunch of men came in, didn't explain to her in Spanish what was happening. They took all of her clothes off. They put her in a ripped suicide smock, and they put her in her restraint chair, and the smock left her breast exposed, and her hands were restrained so she couldn't pull it up. And the guards were laughing at her the whole time, and they would like walk past and look in the window at her, and watching her, and left her like that for hours. That's their response to a mental health emergency. It's beyond unacceptable, and it's punitive, and that is not an acceptable way to treat a human being. So there are many stories like hers. She is just one person who was able to connect with an attorney and was willing to speak out. There are a lot of stories that go untold because people aren't able to connect with an attorney or are like justifiably afraid of retaliation.
Exactly. Well, I read that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
No, you're good. You can jump in.
No, I appreciate you bringing this up, because a lot of people don't know what's going on in our own state, our own backyard, especially in terms of these detention centers where they're off in the middle of nowhere, right? And then it's difficult for people's stories to get out because of exactly what you said. They don't have access. They're scared of retaliation. And I mean, and I'll talk a little bit about, and for people watching, or people who just got in, I went to this detention center and did a surprise visit and did a tour. And what I saw was horrible. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I got the sense too that part of the reason that there's these horrible conditions are, number one, obviously no investment, and there just there's not a care in the world about the quality of life of the folks who are there and being detained. But number two, part of me feels like it's part of the process. So that way, or it's part of it. It's so bad that these people want to just drop their process and stop fighting against their own deportation. So that way they can just say, you know what, just like just send me wherever I can't be here anymore. And there are so many people I spoke with that were there that said, yeah, honestly, I remember there was one guy I was talking with who said, I just kind of gave up on fighting my deportation because this is worse than anything I've ever experienced. And they're sending me back to Haiti. And like, for people who don't know, Haiti right now is in a horrible situation. I mean, it is hell on earth for a lot of people. And he said, I rather like risk and fight for my life on the street of Haiti right now, where it's insane anarchy, versus be in this center where he's not serving a sentence, but he's playing out a process. So this is a part of me thinks that these horrible conditions are also part of a greater strategy to get these folks to stop advocating on behalf of themselves and just leave in the first place. But I wanna turn it over to Meredith. Meredith, I've heard your story and we've spoken on Zoom before, and I just appreciate you so much for your advocacy despite what you've been through and the trauma you've been through. And would love you to talk a little bit about your husband, and a little bit about your story.
Absolutely. So my husband was detained at Baker for 16 months. And we knew going into this process that we were going to have, an uphill battle to fight his deportation. But we, decided that we were committed to really going through it and taking the time to litigate it to the furthest extent that we could. And so we knew it would take some time, and ICE has a lot of leeway or bandwidth to decide who they want to detain and for how long. And so we were prepared for that. But I think what is interesting is that there are many complaints being made or brought to the public now that were happening several years ago. And my husband was released from ICE custody in September, and all of the issues that were going on a year ago are still happening today at Baker. So my husband, like Amy said, he was on certain medications. Some of these medications were for his psychiatric, diagnoses, and he was consistently denied access to those medications. And they would, come to give out the medication to the facility, members of the facility, and they were out. They told him, we're out of stock. Yeah. And I'm a pretty, I advocated very strongly for my husband. So I was in contact with or emailing the sheriff directly and the lieutenant that oversees the ICE facility within their detention center. And I was met with either silence or I was dismissed. And so my husband was put in situations where his life was in jeopardy because of the immediate stop of these medications that he relies on. He was constantly being threatened with solitary confinement, and so were all of the men that were housed in the area that he was. It was, what should be the last resort in getting compliance from a detainee was often the first thing that was threatened. Asking them to bring water to the pod that he was housed in would be met with someone yelling at them through the intercom system that they better all shut up or they were going to be put in solitary confinement. There was, the feeling that there was no oversight. No one knew what was happening, and there was a real fear of retaliation. For my husband, it experienced this, and ICE actually moved him to a different Florida facility 2 weeks prior to him being released. He had gotten a job as a trustee because he had, over the year that he was there, had no disciplinary issues or problems. He got along, amicably with the people that he was housed with. And he was then terminated from this position after he and I had communicated with your office and the ACLU sharing about the conditions in Baker. Not only was he the job taken away, but he was then told that they would give him the job back if he told me to stand down and basically say that I misunderstood what had occurred and that I was sorry about that, but everything was fine. I mean, that was a specific, direct thing said from a lieutenant that works for the Baker County Sheriff's Office to my husband. And my husband is in a situation at this point where he's dancing, trying to keep me up to speed, but also he said to me, Mary, you do not live here. And he's afraid. And so at that point, I kind of got quiet, but I didn't ever retract any of my complaints because I felt like that was just even more risky for him. And they proceeded to tell my husband that they would communicate with his wife and imply that he was being unfaithful in our marriage and that they had information about him communicating with other women in order to be divisive between me and my husband and prevent me from advocating on his behalf on the outside.
Yeah.
And my husband said, I tell my wife everything. All of our phone calls are recorded. All those things are accessible. So they could be aware of that information, but he had already told me, this is what they're saying, this is what they're trying to do. And it goes
Also
to,
just completely inappropriate anyway, too. I mean, just completely inappropriate thing for an officer in a detention facility to even involve themselves in, and obviously they're trying to create riff.
Yeah, and so of course, my husband's been there for over a year. The other detainees know he's been there for a very long time. They're going to my husband as a resource because he's familiar with how it works. And so my husband is also, by way of them retaliating against my husband or threatening to, they're also making it very clear that this is how they will interact with people who are trying to fight for their rights. And so, at this point, the retaliation was obvious. He was uncomfortable. He's uncomfortable now, and he's at home.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's just really important to understand that the things that are being brought to light are continuing to happen, and they are escalating.
Yep.
Because Baker County has consistently been able to act without accountability.
Yep.
And so, even during my husband's time there, we had problems just like the complainant does, with access to legal communication, medication, medical neglect. They would say my husband had refused a medical visit. He's been trying to get his tooth pulled for 8 months. And, he's like, they never came to me and they showed me a refusal form that is signed and it's not my signature. And he's like, I would have run to get to go to the dentist. He was so miserable. And so I think that there was just this is a consistent pattern that is showing that Baker County is incapable of executing the responsibilities that they have under their contract from ICE. And that even the communication to, as I communicated with ICE leadership as well, it's extremely hard to substantiate these issues because they're being purposefully hidden from the public. So, after that situation with my husband and the threat about, he was cheating on me with someone, I finally was able to get in contact with someone, and they actually moved my husband to a different facility 2 weeks prior to the immigration judge ruling in our favor and releasing my husband from custody. And
Where'd they move him to? Was he moved to South Florida?
Yeah, they took him down to Miami at Chrome. It's really wild to see the discrepancy just between those two
facilities.
Yeah, when that there's a standard that has to be met in some form or another in both cases.
Exactly. I appreciate you bringing that up here because I think it's important just to take a step back and for people listening and watching this. Of course, I have my politics on immigration at large and that ICE should probably not exist and all this. But let's take a step back. There is a standard for a federal detention facility that is set and should be met in the current conditions we're in as we, continue to fight for the world we believe in and how we think our immigration system should be more humane. And it's interesting because I've spoken with so many people when I was at Baker who said, I would do anything to go back to the South Florida facility. It is night and day. It is crazy that how much they are completely mistreating us here. Of course, mistreating, but the facility itself. And for people who don't know, and you brought it up, Meredith, this is a contracted facility. It's contracted out from ICE. So this is actually the facility itself really is a jail, or is the Baker County jail, and half of the facility is used for that holding inmates, and the other part of it, the other wing, is used for this ICE contracted out contract to have an ICE detention facility there. And they are just number one, it's not built for that. It is built to hold inmates and once again, we'll say these folks who are being held by ICE, they have not been convicted of something. They're not serving, or they're not serving a sentence. They are waiting out a process. And I guess I can just go in and talk a little bit about my experience going there. Is I went into I went there out of nowhere to do a surprise visit. The surprise visit, obviously, they didn't want to let me in at first, and kind of I was just, I don't like to, be like, do you know who I am, kind of thing, but I pulled that there, and was like, I'm a member of the House Oversight Committee, and they let me in. And what I saw was horrible, and I saw conditions that no human should have to live in. I mean, a lot of these cells, especially we were talking about the medical unit. The problem here too is a lot of that medical unit is being used to house people or being used as a solitary confinement. And so they had these big tarps over all the windows of all of these cells, and so I just, I first I asked, can you lift these tarps? And they were like, well, we gotta check. We gotta check if we can lift the tarp. So I just walked over and lifted one of them. And looking in there, the first cell I saw, this is the first cell I saw at Baker. There was a pool of water in the middle of the cell, which, if for people aren't Floridians, a pool of water like that in these facilities harbors bacteria. I mean, it's very unsafe from a medical point of view. Um, I saw the towels that the inmates had that were completely tattered, ripped apart. They were really disgusting. I look at I don't even know if you can call it a bed. I was in jail overnight at 33rd, which is the jail in Orange County. And I mean, of course, those conditions are not good. But what I was on compared to what folks had in this facility is insane. You can't even call it a mattress. It's like a very thin thing, this big, of like foam or something like that, that looked incredibly uncomfortable. Um, there were leaks from the ceiling, and it was just a horrible, horrible way for somebody to live. One of the last ones I looked at had a bunch of flies in it, just flies everywhere. The smell was horrible. And then when I sat down or then when I went outside to see how people spend their time outside, I got told, I think it was, I don't actually don't my Baker notes in front of me, but I think it was an hour a week or something like that. What
I think
what
it's
is it?
supposed to be an hour a day, but I don't think it consistently happens every
An
single
hour a day,
day.
yeah, and it doesn't consistently happen. And the interesting thing is, I was speaking with some folks who came from the Miami facility, and they said it was more than an hour a day to be able to go outside. And the thing is that they're put in a very small area as well, and so when I was speaking with folks who were there, a lot of the detainees, they kept bringing up one of two things. Number one, they want to move to another facility because they just can't do it there anymore. Or number two, they rather go back to their home country where things are not good, because they feel like they can fare better for themselves on the street of Haiti right now, being dropped off on the streets with no money, no nothing, versus being in Baker. And that's part of the reason why, folks might ask, well, Maxwell, why do you care? This is not in my district specifically. Why would you care about what's going on there? Well, number one, I sit on the House Oversight Committee, and our job is supposed to be to oversee the federal government and to make sure we're doing things in the correct manner. This is not the correct manner. This is not the correct manner for inmates, for detainees, for humans. No one should have to live like that, especially when they're playing out a process that we have prescribed as a nation. And that's, why I think it's so important. Everyone should care about what's going on at Baker. We, especially in Orlando, in my district, we're a very diverse community. There are many families that are mixed status families. And here's the thing, y'all. Brass tacks, we're about to go into an administration that has promised the largest deportation force in the history of our nation. And for people don't know what that means, it means we're going to see other agencies of government weaponized to go out and find people and deport deport them from our country or put them in some sort of facility. And these are the kind of facilities that we're talking about. And here's the thing: if we think it's bad now, with the amount of numbers of people that Trump wants to deport, we're talking about them working at creating mass camps overnight or over the course of just a few months to throw people in. And so what Baker provides us is obviously a massive call for action now, because there's people in there now, but also shows us what can happen at scale, what will happen at scale if we don't advocate, and make sure people know about it. And so that's part of the reason why I'm passionate about making sure that we end this contract, because the folks there are not doing the job that's prescribed. It's not becoming of a federal facility, and people we just need to shut down Baker. And so I kind of want to go into talking a little bit about what folks at home can do. Um, and would love to hear from both of you, kind of, what people can do. We are hoping that in this lame duck period, that this current administration can rescind this contract. But yeah, what I saw at Baker County Detention Center is just some of the worst conditions of living I've ever seen in my life. And seeing the fear in the faces of the people I spoke with, you can tell that their spirit has been crushed. Um, and I haven't even spoken about the food yet, right? That the fact that either they're not getting fed enough food, or the food they're getting fed is just completely disgusting. And so either way, Amy, I'll pass it to you. What can folks at home do to help us shut down Baker?
Yeah, so if you want to get involved, there's a few options. You can read a lot more about everything on our website. We have submitted numerous civil rights and civil liberties complaints. Other advocacy organizations have posted a lot of information about this facility as well. Just get more informed and then call your representatives. Tell them to shut down Baker. Tell them to oppose expanding ICE detention. ICE is clearly not equipped to handle that, and they don't care to do it well, if you can do it well. And we also have a petition that you can sign to join the Shutdown Baker campaign. There's a link to that petition in our Instagram bio, and you can also find it on our website. But just getting more informed about these issues and talking about these issues to more people, I think will make a big difference. A lot of people just have no idea how bad things are in ICE detention centers, and they care once they learn about it, but they just don't realize how bad things are in our backyard. So just spreading awareness about these issues and pushing our government to end these contracts instead of expanding detention.
Yeah. I really appreciate both of you joining today. Sorry, I'm in my DC office, and that's our voting clock, and we can't like turn it down or turn it off. So we just have to power through. I also want to bring up one thing before we end the live too that folks should know. Of recent, there's been a new whistleblower who's a former Baker County Detention Center medical practitioner. So this person worked in the medical side there. They've come forward to talk about blatant breaches of federal law, dangerous abuses of humans that are detained at Baker, including, and I have a list here, staff falsifying medical records, denying folks medical care, people who need it, racial and sexual harassment and abuse, and torturous solitary confinement, among other degrading conditions. And so this is important. Whistleblowers are going to be more important now more than ever, especially as we move into this Trump administration. I'll end with a story. I remember one of the people I spoke with at Baker when she came in. Um, she asked me if I knew Spanish. She wanted to speak a mix of Spanish and English, and I was like, "Wait, you're Cuban?" She was like, "Yeah, I'm Cuban," and she's actually from around the same part my mom is from Cuba. Either way, we started chatting, and she said one of the worst things that is the difference between Baker and she was in the South Florida facility is the clothes that she's given to wear, and the fact that a lot of women end up getting different infections and urinary tract infections because the undergarments they're given are shared amongst everybody, and a lot of times they use harsh chemicals and bleach to kind of quickly clean things and immediately give it to somebody. And so from the food to what people are wearing to flies and mold inside of where they are to the COs themselves mistreating people, this facility has to be shut down. It has to be shut down immediately. It's not in accordance with the way the federal government should be running any sort of facility. Um, but also, it's just completely inhumane to treat other humans this way, and it's not something we should be doing. So, Meredith, thank you so much for joining. I have so much respect for you because I know this is very difficult to be able to fight like this, especially when you have people coming for you and people trying to separate and create riff. But I just appreciate you so much. I want to give it to both of you all if you have something to say here at the end.
I just want to thank you for your attention to this matter too. This is something our organization and a lot of organizations have been speaking out about for a long time to deaf ears, and we really appreciate you joining the cause. And we agree this has to end immediately. No one should be treated the way people are treated at Baker.
Yeah, I co-sign that as well. It just helps people remain hopeful, knowing that there are people listening and advocating on their behalf. It's really important. Thank you.
Of course. And thanks for everyone who joined or anyone who's watching. To stay involved, of course, please follow me if you're coming from the ACLU side. Also follow the ACLU of Florida, ACLU FL, and sign the petition to shut down Baker because that's an important, easy first thing you can do, and we'll make sure we keep people updated. Thank you all so much. Let's shut down Baker. Thank you.
Thank you all.